Good evening and welcome. Tonight we will be reading some articles out of History magazine. And tonight's theme, as you can see by the title, is Homer's Greece. We will be reading about Mycenae, the civilization of palaces, and Odysseus, the hero's return. So, if you don't know who Homer was, he was allegedly blind and a poet who told stories by word of mouth around like the fire at night, telling these stories of heroes. And there are two stories that is attributed to him, the Iliad and the Odyssey. So the Iliad, we find out, has a little bit of truth to it, but it is set during the time of Mycenae. So we'll learn all about the era of Mycenae. Odysseus was the protagonist of the Odyssey. So we'll learn all about him too. Plus there's a movie coming out pretty soon of the Odyssey. So that'll be interesting to see. I bet they put out this article in time for the movie. But we'll start with Mycenae over here. We'll go in chronological order. Now, these articles were chosen by my channel members to read. They were chosen by All the Happy Squirrels, Alessia, Pill, Luna, Alex, Bocce, Victoria, and M. Rosalie. Thank you so much for requesting these articles. And if you watching this want to request a History magazine article in the future, you can become a channel member by clicking the join button that's right down there. Or if it's not there for you for whatever reason, there could be many reasons that YouTube messes up, it would be in the description box in the very first link there. You can click that and it'll take you to my channel member page. My channel memberships are only 99 cents a month. That's US cents. Because that is the cheapest I can set it to. If I can make it lower, I would, because I would want as many people to join as possible without worrying about how much it costs. Plus, I know I have viewers all over the world, and 99 cents can be very different in different countries. It could be very, very expensive. So I want to, accommodate. Like if I set it to $5, that could be out of people's price range in other countries. So it's 99 cents. So that as many people can join as they want without having to worry about the cost. And you don't just get to pick History magazine articles. You get your name in every video. You get to watch all the videos early. You get behind the scenes content, which I am working on a video. I know I said that last week, but I promise I am. I just have to finish editing it. It's a little exciting about, we found a mystery trap door in our new house and we finally explored it. So you're going to want to see what we found in there. But yeah, you get all kinds of goodies. So I'd love to have you join. First of all, if you can hear outside, the outside noises are going to be a little louder than usual because it is finally hot. We have our little box air conditioner in the window. So the window is like permanently open. So you'll hear like every single car that drives by, even though it's the middle of the night. I apologize for that. And also, as always, these pages are very glossy. They're very pretty in person, but no matter what light is on, it creates a reflection that's really bright. So I do apologize for that. This is the dimmest reflection I can possibly create, I suppose. But let's move on and read about Mycenae. A unique civilization of kingdoms flourished between the 16th to 12th centuries BCE, leaving its mark on subsequent civilizations of ancient Greece. The societies are named after Mycenae, the site that first gained renown through the work of archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann in the 1870s. Later excavations revealed other Mycenaean centers in the Argolis region, such as Tiryns and Mydia. I'm not sure if that's how you say that. My apologies for any mispronunciations in this video. The Mycenaean culture spread throughout the Peloponnesus, around Sparta and Pylos, as well as on the other side of the isthmus of Corinth, such as Attica, including its capital Athens, Boeotia, notably Gla, Orchomenus, and Thebes, and Thessaly. The modern village of Dimini lies near the location of the Mycenaean city of Iolcus, which was also the legendary homeland of the mythical hero Jason. Though these cities were capitals of small, independent kingdoms, their shared features suggest a single culture distinct from contemporaries in the Near East and Egypt. Unity can be found in the layout of Mycenaean cities, which resembled each other in location, architecture, and the interior design of space. Nearly all the Mycenaean centers were on high ground that stood out from the landscape, which allowed them to control the surrounding area. Some cities, such as Pylos, did not build defensive walls, perhaps due to the influence of palaces in the Minoan culture, centered in Crete, which existed without such protection. Yet most Mycenaean citadels were massively fortified. The Mycenaeans used so-called Cyclopean masonry. The term was coined in the 19th century from the writings of Pausanias, a geographer and traveler in the 2nd century CE, who, in his description of Greece, the first known travel guide, stated that the enormous size of those walls meant that only cyclopes, mythological monsters, could have built them. Cyclopean walls were made of huge, rough-hewn stones called ashlars, meaning they were not cut square and were stacked without any mortar to bind them. The Mycenaeans may have borrowed this type of construction from the Hittites, a powerful Anatolian civilization with whom they maintained diplomatic relations. The most representative of these fortification walls can still be seen in Mycenae. At their widest, sections stretch nearly 9 yards long and reach 9 yards high. Their peak height is unknown, but some estimates suggest they soared up to 19 yards. The site also contains the only Mycenaean example of an ornate monumental entrance, the famous Lion Gate, named for the animals depicted on the lintel. This may have been an emblem of the Mycenaean royal house, or a kind of talisman to ward off evil spirits. No less remarkable are the fortifications of Tiryns, a city that Homer, centuries later, described in the Iliad as well-walled for their mighty size, or those of the magnificent Gla. The citadel of Gla was the largest, and its walls the longest, forming a circuit of about 1.8 miles. Mycenae's walls were not even half as long. Outside the walls, there were suburbs of homes and workshops, generally built beside a road, as well as scattered farmhouses where crops were grown. Necropolises have also been found outside the walls. These include elite burial sites, such as sepulchres called tholoi, and the Mycenaean grave circles. The throne room. Inside, Mycenaean citadels were organized in a similar way. Apart from private homes of varying sizes, there were places dedicated to religious worship, suggested by the presence of wall paintings, statuettes, and other votive offerings. Buildings were erected around the main structure in Mycenaean cities, the palace, or anakteron in Greek. Its set of structures were typically located in the central or highest part of the citadel. There are few remains of palaces in most Mycenaean sites, but those preserved in Mycenae, Tiryns, and above all Pylos, provide a glimpse of their splendor. The identifying feature of a Mycenaean palace is the megaron, a Greek term derived from megas, or large. The megaron was a rectangular structure divided into 3 compartments. The first was a portico, or Ithaca, supported by columns that faced an open courtyard. The second was a large door that led to a hall, or prodomos. Behind this was the most important space, the domos, known as the main hall or throne room, as it contained the seat of the sovereign. In the megaron at Tiryns, the stone base where the throne is believed to have been placed has been located. In the center of the room, a fire at the hearth, or eshkara, was used for cooking over the embers and to heat and light the room. An opening in the roof allowed smoke to escape. 4 columns around the hearth supported the roof. The megaron's walls would have been covered with figurative polychrome frescoes. The best preserved megaron is in the palace at Pylos, known as the Palace of Nestor, a reference to the old king who, according to the Iliad, reigned there and marched with other Mycenaean sovereigns to conquer Troy. The floor of beaten and compacted earth is preserved, plus some fragments of the ornamentation on the walls, and even an imprint of the fluted shaft columns, the only example in Mycenaean archaeology. On one side of the megaron sits a room with a kind of chest or bathtub called larnax on a masonry plinth. It was thought that the room was intended for the monarch's personal hygiene, but the tub's small size makes this unlikely. You can see it right here in the picture. Other rooms in the palace served power-related functions. Storage rooms have been documented. They held large jars, or pithoi, of wine and olive oil, given as tribute or as an offering to the lords of the palace by the surrounding population. There were workshops to manufacture consumer goods, textiles, perfumes, furs, weapons, furniture, and fine tableware. Rooms have been discovered at Pylos crammed with stacked vessels. There were also workshops to smith gold and silver or carve ivory, precious materials imported from the eastern Mediterranean. Look at these after. Palace ruins at Thebes contained remains of lapis lazuli, a mineral found in what is now Afghanistan, which may have arrived in Boeotia via Mesopotamian trading partners. Boeotia, right? Is that how you say that? Like the constellation Boötes, I think. Let me know if I'm wrong. Kings and generals. To effectively manage these riches, the palaces had scribes who kept the accounts on clay tablets. Incoming and outgoing products were recorded with the Mycenaean culture's writing system, Linear B. At Pylos, in 2 rooms very close to the palace entrance, the largest Mycenaean collection of hundreds of short-term records on tablets were discovered. A study of these documents has provided insight into some aspects of the political organization of Mycenaean society. At the head was the king, or wanax, a term that appears on the tablets and is practically the same as that used in the Iliad to refer to Agamemnon, the commander of the Greek expedition against Troy. The wanax wielded supreme power with religious overtones and owned land and enslaved people. The second most important figure in the palace was the Lawagetas, the head of the armed forces. Experts believe he had a megaron smaller than the main one, as such a structure has been found in Pylos, Tiryns, and Mycenae. The Wanax and Laogatus appear to embody a duality of political, religious, and military power, potentially influenced by some Indo-European or Minoan peoples, a topic still debated by scholars. There were also high-ranking men and aristocrats called Telestai and Hecatai, respectively. Subordinate to these was a series of officials called courtiers and guacileves in the tablets, who administered the kingdom, which was divided into agricultural estates known as damoi, from which the Greek word demos, the people, is derived. A swift end. The world of the imposing Mycenaean palaces came to a sudden end. Around 1200 BCE, the Mycenae and Pylos enclosures were burned and destroyed. Experts have attributed this to an invasion by the Dorians, a Greek people. The Pylos tablets end abruptly in a spring month, with instructions to the troops ordered to defend the coast against the invaders. Although groups of people continued to live in the surroundings of the ancient palaces, the dazzling Mycenaean civilization ceased to exist in the late Bronze Age. Mycenaean life, religion, and architecture left a profound legacy, forming the foundation of what would become features of archaic and classical Greece. After the collapse of this austere, militaristic society, Greece entered a period of relative poverty and isolation known as the Greek Dark Ages, during which the linear B writing system was lost. However, the legends of Mycenaean kings and warriors endured, passed down orally until Homer immortalized them in the Iliad and the Odyssey, honoring Bronze Age heroes such as Agamemnon, Achilles, and Odysseus, which we'll learn about next. The Mycenaean Palace Megaron, with its columned hall and central hearth, directly influenced the form of later Greek temples, such as those at Olympia and Delphi. And there is one more picture. Interesting. It's an old sketch, it looks like. Let's see. A monumental discovery. A 19th century engraving depicts Heinrich Schliemann's excavation of the largest of the beehive tombs, called the Treasury of Atreus, also known as the Tomb of Agamemnon. Pretty amazing. You see people here and how big these walls are. Makes sense why they called them Cyclopean. Mycenaean tombs pictured at right as part of the grave circle A in the Acropolis of Mycenae, surrounded by a wall. And at left are the remains of what has been identified as a granary over here. This is a Mycenaean bronze dagger showing a lion hunting scene. Doesn't look like it's going very well. These two lions are running away. This one's attacking. This is located at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. Here's one of those tablets. Let's read about it. Palace receipts and invoices. Over the past 150 years, hundreds of tablets bearing cuneiform writing have been uncovered in places in the Near East and Egypt, like Ebla and Amarna. They contain a variety of documents, such as commercial inventories, letters, and laws. The tablets found in Mycenae, by contrast, were used purely for economic and administrative reasons. They contain lists of people and goods drawn up by the palace bureaucracy as part of their work. It's possible that longer-term records were transferred onto papyrus or simply not kept. The tablets that are preserved date back to the collapse of the Mycenaean civilization around 1200 BCE. When the palace of Nestor was engulfed by fire, the intense heat baked the clay tablets, turning them into durable pottery. The inscribed texts were thus preserved under the rubble of the collapsed buildings. Let's look at this one. It says it's written in Linear B, of course, and it's from the archives of the Palace of Nestor at Pylos, and this is located at the Kora Archaeological Museum. Now here's a cool depiction of what the throne room would have looked like. It says this illustration of a Mycenaean palace's megaron is based on excavations and finds at Mycenaean sites, particularly in Pylos. Here you can see the frescoes. A few traces of the artwork that once adorned the throne room have been preserved. There's chairs for guests over here. They look pretty cozy. According to Homer, the Mycenaean kings had seats in the megaron for visitors. Here is the central hearth. In the center, a hearth just over 4 yards in diameter had a continuously burning fire. A smoke outlet in the ceiling helped keep the air clean. You can see up here, sunlight coming through. There's big columns here. Traces of fluted columns have been discovered in the megaron at the palace at Pylos. And here's the throne. In the palace at Mycenae, experts place the royal throne, which has not been preserved, on the south wall of the throne room, based on excavations in other Mycenaean palaces. And then we zoom out to the whole palace. As a reconstruction shows how the palace at Mycenae may have looked. The site featured a megaron, an area where the king would discuss matters with the elite. Let's start with this little diagram here, the megaron at Mycenae. Heinrich Schliemann's excavations at Mycenae revealed a characteristic megaron of Mycenaean palaces. Facing an open courtyard, which you see right here, can you see? You can see. It consists of a portico supported by columns, right here, and 2 covered spaces. The hall and the throne room, with a central hearth over the smoke outlet, which is right there. And then the second throne room is believed to have been directly opposite for the military guy, right? You can see right there the courtyard, there's the first room, there's the throne room, the gap for the smoke, and the second throne room right there. Let's see what these say. Over here, it says it's a small courtyard found in the private gardens may have been used for more intimate activities or ceremonies. It looks like out the back entrance there's a staircase leading to the Propylaeum, the main entrance of the palatial Acropolis. So here's that little bathtub thing they were talking about. This is in Pylos. The central hearth is seen in a secondary megaron at Pylos. In the foreground is a larnax, previously thought to be... Oh, no, sorry. I'm reading this completely wrong. The circular hearth at back, makes more sense, is seen in the secondary megaron at Pylos. In the foreground is a larnax, previously thought to be a bathtub, but its small size leaves this up for debate. It looks like a foot bath. It doesn't look like someone would fit in it. But who knows? Maybe it was like a baby bathtub. Bathtub for ants. Palaces and Homeric heroes. Although composed in the 8th century BCE, the Iliad and the Odyssey are set in the Mycenaean civilization of the Late Bronze Age. The epic poems depict prominent Archaean warlords who commanded armies as kings of the ancient Mycenaean cities. Amateur archaeologist Frank Calvert conducted initial excavations on the mound of Hisarlik in the 1860s, now widely believed to be the site of Troy. Lacking funding to continue, he convinced archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann that the epic poems weren't mere myths. When Schliemann excavated the layers at Troy in the 1870s, he was sure he had found the Iliad city of Ilion. That sound outside is someone putting their trash cans outside, which I found out in the UK they're called wheelie bins, which is fantastic, and I feel like we in the States should be calling them wheelie bins. But yeah, that's someone putting their trash out. There they go. Anyway, Ilion. He also identified his discoveries in Mycenae as the treasury of Atreus, the tomb of Clytemnestra, and the tomb of Aegisthus. Meanwhile, Carl Blegen excavated the palace of Nestor at Pylos. So here is Clytemnestra, armed with a dagger, ready to murder her husband Agamemnon as he slept. This is from a 19th century oil painting by Pierre Narcisse Guérin, and it's located at the Louvre in Paris. Here's Mycenae from above. The city rich in gold, according to Homer. And then here's a map of all the Mycenaean areas. Mycenaean cultures all in yellow, so we can see Iolcus, Gla, Thebes, Athens, Mycenae, Tiryns, Sparta, Pylos. Down here on Crete, which is where the Minoan civilization was, is Knossos and Phaistos. And here's Miletus and Ephesus, right on the border with the Hittite lands there. And you can see Troy right there. So important for next is there's Troy, and Odysseus is going to have to sail through all of this to get home, right? I think there's a map there that we'll see too. This is the Lion Gate. It says here that we don't know if these lions are male or female because their heads are missing, so we don't know if they had manes or not. So we don't know. It's unfortunate. And then there's a little painting over here, a restored fresco from the Palace of Tiryns, dogs attacking this wild boar. It says hunting was a favorite hobby of Mycenaean elites. All right, let's move on to the next article about Odysseus, the hero's return. Put that over there, and let's read this article. Do you hear all the crackling static sounds? I'm like going like this. Do you hear all the crackling static sounds? I hope not. I don't know what's happening. Usually that makes a sound when I have an incoming text on my phone. So someone's either blowing up my phone right now that I'm filming on, or there's some kind of airplane interference overhead. I do not know. Regardless, let's read about Odysseus. Night was falling on the palace of Alcinous, king of the legendary island realm of the Phaeacians. The island's inhabitants had gathered in the atrium and courtyard of the sovereign's great mansion to listen to Demodocus, a prestigious Aoidos, singer or oral poet, to whom a muse had given the gift of song in exchange for his sight. You know, like Homer. The hospitable king had sent for him to entertain the guests at a banquet held to honor the mysterious sailor shipwrecked on his shores. The elderly poet began to tell the story of how, in a stratagem devised by the famous Odysseus, known as Ulysses in Latin, a handful of Greek warriors had hidden inside a gigantic wooden horse and passed through the walls of Troy after a 10-year siege, and how the Achaean or Greek army had finally conquered the city and put its inhabitants to the sword. As he listened to this account of the massacre, the unknown castaway felt the full weight of a war he knew all too well. Finally, managing to hold back his tears, he rose to his feet and announced, "I am Odysseus." Then he started to recount, in his own words, the eventful journey he had taken from the shores of Troy to the Phaeacians' island on the seemingly never-ending quest to return to his kingdom, Ithaca. The journey had taken him across a sea populated by mysterious enchantresses, monstrous beings with captivating voices and homicidal intentions, man-eating giants, and strange, narcotized flower eaters. Back to the sea. By way of mythical tales such as the Odyssey by Homer, whom tradition portrays as a venerable blind poet in the image of Demodocus, the Greeks of the Archaic era became reacquainted with the ancient sea their ancestors had utterly dominated 4 centuries earlier in the Bronze Age, during the height of the Mycenaean civilization. While the Iliad recounts legendary events dating back to that time, the Odyssey reflects a later setting in Greek history when, a couple hundred years after the collapse of Mycenaean society in the 12th century BCE, the Greeks finally ventured out to sea again, in search of new lands and trade contacts on ships that had only a rudimentary square sail, a mast, a bowsprit, and oars. Trade in the eastern Aegean Sea had gradually resumed from the 10th to the 8th century BCE, when it is estimated that the Odyssey was composed. This materialized into the following expansion we call Greek colonization. In this time of exploration and reacquaintance with the sea, Odysseus became a model of how to act in a universe full of dangers and mysteries. Before he became the famous sailor of the Odyssey, the king of Ithaca had been a formidable warrior who had fought on the front line on the plains of Troy. But in the course of his later voyage, he was transformed from an old epic warrior into the hero of a new world. Odysseus the Cunning. Clad in bronze armor and riding on magnificent chariots, the tide of men that Priam, Troy's elderly king, beheld from his city walls was as impressive as it was terrifying. In that famous scene from Book 3 of the Iliad, known as the Thecoscopia, or view from the wall, Homer recounts that Priam, I'm not sure, called for Helen, the former queen of Sparta, who had sparked the war when she eloped, or by other accounts was kidnapped, with the Trojan prince Paris. He asked her to tell him who was the most outstanding of the Achaean warriors besieging his city. Priam gazed at a distinguished figure who walked like a bellwether up and down the ranks, a ram I'd call him, burly, thick with fleece, keeping a flock of silvery sheep in line. That is Laertes' son, Helen replied, the great tactician Odysseus. He was bred on Ithaca, a bare and stony island, but he knows all manner of stratagems and moves in war. Antenor, Priam's wise counselor, recounts that when Odysseus, on an embassy to Troy, rose to speak, he stood and looked at the ground. He launched the strong voice from his chest, and words came driving on the air as thick and fast as winter snowflakes. The king and his counselors stress their fearsome adversary's dominance, both on the battlefield and in expressing his opinion. Excellence in combat and in counsel being the qualities that define Homer's great heroes. Homer employs the adjective polytropos, of many wiles or of many paths, to set Odysseus apart. The term alludes to his cunning, his curiosity, and his resourcefulness in the face of uncertainty. In the Iliad, Odysseus is repeatedly involved in actions requiring skills that transcend simple bravery, including full-out, head-on combat with the enemy, espionage, and complex diplomatic missions. One night, when the Achaeans intend to set out and raid the enemy camp in order to discover the Trojans' intentions, It is Diomedes who dares to take on such a dangerous mission, but only if someone goes with him. All the heroes then offer to accompany him, but he picks Odysseus because he is shrewd and cool and brave beyond all others in rough work. If he were at my side, we'd go through fire and come back, the two of us. No man knows war as he does. Speaking of glazing, goodness. Odysseus could fight as courageously as the most valiant of the Mycenaean warlords. A boar's tusk helmet, which is clearly described in the Iliad as a cap of hide with bands of leather crisscrossed, and on these a boar's white teeth were thickly set, disposed with cunning on all sides, which you can see here, which has been dated to Mycenaean times, points to him being one of them. Traces of an extremely powerful Mycenaean past have been discovered on the islands some scholars suggest he reigned over: Ithaca, Cephallenia, and Leucas. However, Odysseus stands out from the other Mycenaean leaders for his ability to travel unknown paths and cross impassable frontiers, such as the gates of Troy or the land of the dead itself, where he speaks to the soothsayer Tiresias to discover what awaits him in the hazy realms of the future. This is the most difficult stage in the Nostos, his return journey from Troy. I didn't skip a page, right? No, okay. Just checking. When the Iliad is dominated by determined old heroes constantly in pursuit of glory in battle, and whose weapons and mentality harken back to the distant Bronze Age, the Odyssey places its hero in a setting closer to the audience of the 8th century BCE, who could perceive their own historical events reflected in the sea voyage and the founding of a new home. Odysseus tells the Phaeacians how, after he left Troy, his fleet sailed into a storm that carried him far from the civilized world. He reached a mysterious place inhabited by the lotus eaters, men addicted to an intoxicating substance that threatened to make his companions forget their mission to return home. But this is merely the prelude to the next great stage in Odysseus's voyage. He then reaches shores that are less civilized and more primitive than a Greek could ever conceive of, the land of the monstrous Cyclopes, one-eyed, cannibalistic ogres who live in lush surroundings but are ignorant of agriculture and the laws of men. Since they have no ships, the Cyclopes have no contact with the outside world and have not cultivated the sacred duty of hospitality. When Odysseus passes through a thicket and discovers the cave of the Cyclops Polyphemus, his comrades beg him to flee immediately. However, Odysseus, with his explorer's curiosity, decides to wait for the Cyclops so that he can see what he looks like. The uncertainty and fear of a traveler who must navigate uncharted territory are underlined when Polyphemus returns, and Odysseus calls on him to offer the hospitality customarily due to travelers. Polyphemus's response is to devour 2 sailors per day. Odysseus offers him wine and sets a trap. "So you ask me the name I'm known by, Cyclops? I will tell you. Nobody. That's my name." Odysseus and his companions blind the Cyclops while he sleeps off his drunkenness. When the rest of the Cyclopes come to his aid, Polyphemus can only tell them that nobody blinded him. The whole who's on first situation there. This encounter might have been successful were it not for the fact that Odysseus had not yet completed his transition from an old epic hero, eager to make an eternal name for himself, to a hero capable of keeping a low profile when his survival is at stake. Acting just as an old epic warrior would, he later proudly proclaims that his name is Odysseus, Raider of Cities. Polyphemus takes advantage of this information to urge his father, Poseidon, the god of the sea, to punish Odysseus. The triumph of cunning. Casualties increase among Odysseus's men as the journey progresses and new dangers arise, until they reach another exotic place where the explorers sent out by the hero end up losing their humanity. They are in the domain of the sorceress Circe, daughter of Helios, the sun god, who turns those who reach her shores into beasts with her magic wand. But Odysseus, aided by the god Hermes, with whom he shares the epithet Polytropous, manages to subdue the witch, who willingly offers him the keys to the successful completion of his journey. She shows him the route to the land of the dead, an essential step in his return home, and gives him crucial advice to combat the captivating and deceptive call of the sirens. With their bewitching song, the sirens, birds with a woman's face, lure sailors to their shore, where they are shipwrecked and devoured. But Circe advises Odysseus to plug his sailors' ears with wax, while he, tied to the mast, can marvel at the beautiful stories they tell, whose protagonists may include him. The land of the dead is the farthest stage in the hero's journey into the unknown. Shadows appear before Odysseus's men, which only recover a certain glimmer after blood is drunk from a sacrificed animal. The shadows include many of the men who fought by Odysseus's side at Troy, such as Achilles, who admits he would rather be a slave on earth for another man than rule down here over all the breathless dead, and Agamemnon, killed by his wife and her lover, as a man cuts down some ox at the trough. The heroes of the Iliad are shown here to have come to a rather ambiguous end, far from the triumphal glory and tragic defeats of their exploits in life. With this change in heroic values, in which the epics reach for more complex and human conclusions, the new hero must be capable of returning from war and resuming his place in the world. It is in the underworld that Odysseus is given directions back to his homeland by the soothsayer Tiresias, and so he departs again on a voyage racked with storms and sea monsters, which cause the entire crew to perish. Odysseus alone washes up on the goddess Calypso's island. Overcome by nostalgia, he rejects the immortality she offers him and sails away on a raft built with his own hands. It is only then, after another shipwreck, that he reaches the domain of the hospitable Alcinous. Alcinous, maybe? I don't know. Alcinous opens the door to his kingdom by offering Odysseus the hand of his daughter Nausicaa. But Odysseus rejects her because he wishes to return to Ithaca and to his wife, Penelope. Our hero does not wish to found a new kingdom, but prefers his Nostos, the return journey that would grant him everlasting glory. Transported by the Phaeacians, Odysseus finally reaches the shores of Ithaca. His old kingdom, which he barely recognizes at first, has become hostile territory, endangered by a mob of suitors. After his 20-year absence, his home is on the brink of destruction, as nearly 100 young aristocrats from Ithaca vilely squander the absent king's wealth and pressure his wife Penelope to marry one of them and legitimize the usurpation of the kingdom. By making his own home a battlefield, Odysseus reclaims his position on the island and restores order by annihilating the pretenders to his throne. But that is not enough. He needs his wife's acceptance. Penelope, who has faithfully awaited Odysseus's return, must recognize her true husband as the man who had come to claim the kingdom, who has so often hidden his identity during his journey. Although the goddess Athena has restored youth to both of them, Penelope does not recognize him, as she is waiting for a sign that proves Odysseus is standing before her. At this crucial moment, the polytropic hero shows no sign of knowing how to resolve the situation. Then Penelope sends the spark that will reignite her husband's versatile mind. "Eurycleia," she says to her faithful maid, "move the sturdy bedstead out of our bridal chamber, that room the master built with his own hands." Then Odysseus snaps out of his reverie and reveals himself. "Woman, your words, they cut me to the core. Who could move my bed?" Odysseus had made his bridal bed from the trunk of an olive tree, with its roots still deep in the ground. He knew very well that it could not be moved. Impossible task, even for some skilled craftsman, unless a god came down in person, quick to lend a hand. This was the sign Penelope was waiting for. It is only when she accepts her husband's identity that the hero's return is complete. Thanks to Odysseus, the Greeks of the archaic era knew how to act in a changing world. The hero who adhered to the concept of warrior honor was long gone. In contrast to that static attitude, Odysseus represents the journey with its opportunities and risks, and the ability to adapt to a world that is forever in motion. We've got a little thing here about the women in the Odyssey. Even ancient scholars of epic poems stressed the importance of female characters in the Odyssey. Later in the 18th century, it was suggested that it was composed for a female audience. In the 19th century, it was even posited that a woman wrote it, an idea taken up again at the end of the 20th century. More recently, it has been suggested that Penelope is the poem's true heroine. In a poem in which cunning is the sign of a hero, Penelope's wits are what keep Ithaca safe in the absence of its king. So here is a beautiful painting of Circe, the sorceress. Daughter of Helios, the sun god, Circe is a sorceress who turns men who approach her domain into beasts. However, she is unable to bewitch Odysseus, who has been given an antidote from the god Hermes. The poet Hesiod in Theogony, written around the same time as the Odyssey, says that Circe and Odysseus fathered 3 children, Agrius, Latinus, and Telegonus. Then here is the goddess Calypso, lying here just completely nude, kind of low-key iconic. I guess that's Odysseus here. Calypso, whose name means the hidden one, is one of the last survivors of an extinct race. As the daughter of the Titan Atlas, a god, she is a minor goddess. She lived in solitude in a marvelous deep grotto on a lost island. Calypso keeps the shipwrecked Odysseus there for 7 or 10 years, depending on the account, until the goddess Athena, the hero's protector, persuades Zeus to order Calypso to release him. Oh, it has the credits down here. So the Circe is an oil painting by John William Waterhouse from 1892. It's located at the Art Gallery of South Australia in Adelaide. And this is, Odysseus with Calypso, oil painting by Pierre Gérôme from 1934. It's located at the École Nationale Supérieure des Beaux-Arts in Paris. And here's Penelope, the protector of the Oikos. Penelope is described as a woman of exceptional physical and intellectual features, capable of keeping the Oikos, their homestead, running by deceiving the suitors who besiege her. She will tell them who she has chosen as her husband only after she has finished weaving the funeral shroud of her father-in-law, Laertes, which she secretly unweaves at night. Penelope seems to sense that the beggar who has arrived at the palace is her husband, but she keeps silent about it so no one will betray him to the suitors who would kill him. So here's Penelope unweaving her work at night. This is a tapestry by Dora Wheeler from 1886. It's located at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Here is Princess Nausicaa. Nausicaa, the Phaeacian princess, finds Odysseus when he is shipwrecked. He appears to her and her companions naked, and they flee in fear. She gives him food and clothing and falls in love with him. But Odysseus rejects her when her parents, Alcinous and Arete, I think, offer him her hand in marriage. There's Nausicaa and one of her servants discovering Odysseus. This is a close-up of an oil painting by Jean-Alfred Marioton, I think, from 1888. This is at the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. All this gorgeous Art Nouveau, Beaux-Arts style. Really cool. And then this classical one here. Talking about classical, this is very, very old. A 4th century BCE crater made in Capua shows the suitors unsuccessfully defending themselves against Odysseus. Where's Odysseus? I cannot tell. You can see all these people have been murked here. Maybe it's this guy. Oh no, it's this guy, because he's disguised as a beggar. So he looks all old, and he's kicking ass here. This is in the Louvre, it says, from an Ixion painter. Epic of the Domestic Sphere. Following the collapse of Mycenaean society at the end of the 12th century BCE, most of the population of Greece lived in small villages consisting of a few dozen families. The Basileus, or the most common title given to Homer's heroes, was the leader of this new rural society, which revolved around the oikos, or homestead. If the Basileus did not maintain his leadership, he ran the risk of being replaced, as portrayed in the Odyssey. In the absence of Odysseus, and with his elderly father Laertes retired in the countryside, young suitors tried to seize power in Ithaca. Odysseus's son, Telemachus, is unable to stand up to them. The 100 or so nobles who violate the laws of hospitality by devouring Odysseus's goods are fought off and eliminated by a supposedly widowed woman, Penelope, a callow youth, Telemachus, a swineherd named Eurynaeus, an oxherd named Philoetius, and the retired king Laertes, and the faithful nurse Euryclea, and Aoidos, Phemius, and the beggar Odysseus himself. The battlefield is not the plain of Troy, but the homestead, and the combatants are not renowned warriors, but the humble inhabitants of the oikos. Argos, the faithful dog. Odysseus's dog recognizes his master, who has arrived in Ithaca disguised as a beggar. This is a sculpture by Pierre Amédée Durand from 1810. What else do we have? Here's the Cyclops. Odysseus and his companions sneak out of the cave, hidden beneath the rams and Cyclops kept there. The Cyclops kept there. This is an oil painting by Jacob Jourdain from 1635. This is at the Pushkin Museum in Moscow. My eyes are getting so heavy. It's making me so sleepy. I think I'll go to bed after I film this. The Sorceress of Aiaia. On this 5th century BCE Pelike, I'm not sure, this big vase here with handles on the sides. Circe turns one of Odysseus's companions into a pig after giving him a magic potion to make him forget his former life. Big pig man. Rogue pirates or traders. When the Cyclops Polyphemus returns to his cave and finds Odysseus and his men there, he immediately asks them, "Strangers, what brings you here by seaways? A fair traffic? Or are you wandering rogues and ravage other folk by sea?" The Odyssey allowed the Greeks of the early archaic era to establish a connection between the known world and a world that included undiscovered lands and new situations to overcome. The traffic of precious metals and luxury goods from the Near East made the Aegean a risky place, where the Cyclops' question made sense. Once at sea, with a crew determined to protect their goods and eager to obtain more, what was the distinction between pirate and trader? Traders behaved like pirates, and pirates looked like traders. When Odysseus' son Telemachus sets out in search of his father, the goddess Athena appears before him in the guise of Mentes, pirate king of the Taphians, saying he has brought iron to trade, while Eumaeus, Odysseus' faithful swineherd, was actually a prince kidnapped in childhood by Phoenician traders. This is the naval battle and Odysseus blinding Polyphemus, keep trying to say Prometheus, as portrayed on the Aristanos crater. This is from circa 650 BCE. It's in the Capitoline Museum in Rome. I see the ship. I see these soldiers. I don't see a Cyclops getting blinded, but oh well, if they say so. This is the Assos Peninsula of Cephallenia, now Kefalonia, an island potentially in Odysseus' domain where wealth came mainly in herds of livestock. And here's that cool boar's tusk helmet found in Mycenae from the 14th to 13th century BCE. This is in the National Archaeological Museum of Athens. The return of the other heroes. The term nostos, meaning return or plural nostoi, refers to the Achaean heroes' return journeys to their homelands after the end of the Trojan War. These legendary stories, to which the Odyssey alludes as tales known to its audience, gave rise to epic poems called the nostoi, which are now lost. When the time came to go home, a dispute between brothers Agamemnon and Menelaus, the kings of Mycenae and Sparta, respectively, caused the Greek fleet to split. Some stayed with Agamemnon, while others sailed with Menelaus. Each hero had his own adventure on his return, and very different outcomes. While Menelaus returned happily to Sparta, Agamemnon was killed upon his return by his wife and her lover. In some traditions, Diomedes and Idomeneus were also victims of conspiracies by their wives' lovers and fled to Italy, where they settled, as did Philoctetes, who found refuge in southern Italy. This area of the western Mediterranean was where the Greeks began to expand and colonize, circa 770 BCE, which was when these dramatic tales of return took shape. There's another big pot here. It says, after coming back to his kingdom of Mycenae, Agamemnon dies at the hands of his wife Clytemnestra and her lover Aegisthus. This is another crater attributed to the Docimasia painter. This is at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. We've got a drawing here of what Troy probably looked like. You see the Dardanelles there. And then here's the map I told you about. So yeah, there's the Troy, Mycenaean, Sparta, and over here is Ithaca. That would be Odysseus' domain over here. So he had to sail all the way back home, but obviously got very lost along the way. It's to say in 1870, Heinrich Schliemann's excavations of the Turkish hill called Hisar Lake proved the existence of Troy. Yeah, up until then, it was thought that Troy was just a myth, that it was all just a story, but then they found Troy. Here's a really cool painting of the sirens. You can see them there. There's Odysseus tied to the mast. Another siren right there. Let's see. This is from, oh, this is in Pompeii. This is on a wall in Pompeii. But it also says this is in the British Museum in London, so it's probably carved out by the looks of it. Brought to the British Museum. And then here's Homer. This is a bust from the 1st century, and it's at the Prado Museum in Madrid. There he is. Alright, that's going to be it for tonight. I am so sleepy. My eyes are like closing. I don't know about you guys. If you're still awake, congratulations. But thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy this style of content, please consider subscribing. And if you wish to participate in selecting History Magazine articles, be sure to click the join button. That's right down there, somewhere around that area. That would be cool if you can join. I'm very close to 200 members. I need just a couple more. That'll be really fun to hit 200. I really like round numbers. They make me happy. If you'd like to join, please do. I'd love to have you. Thank you again for watching. I hope you found this video to be relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a good